Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and I hope you're all doing well. If you're new here, I live full-time in my 4Runner, traveling around taking landscape photos, making editing videos like this one, or just talking about my struggles about life on the road. It's pretty clear I'm not currently in the 4Runner. I'm still house sitting, which means another editing video. If you'd be into any of that, check out a few of my other videos and subscribe based off of that. But if you're not into that and you just end up liking this video, give it a like at the end of the video. Today, we're going to be talking about the color range masks in Lightroom. We're going to be thinking outside the box a little bit with them. I have 7 examples to show you. Shouldn't take very much time. I will be using my Lightroom editing companion that is linked down below. So if you are interested in learning editing, learning good principles or workflow in Lightroom, check that out. It'll explain everything that it does. But for this tutorial, I'll explain what I'm doing regardless of using that. Let's jump into Lightroom. I'm going to start this off showing you the most obvious use case of the color range mask that you probably already know, but just in case. So if you recognize this image from not too long ago, we actually did the full edit in that video that you could check out here. So the most obvious use case is when you come in here and you create a new mask, you go down to color range, and then it's going to give you a little dropper. That little dropper, we're going to select the aspen trees here, and then I'm going to hold Option or Alt on a PC. I'm going to refine this so that we select more of the aspens in the scene. And then all I'm going to do is use this to brighten up the aspens. So I'm going to bring up my whites first, always, and then bring up my exposure. And that's just going to make those little aspen trees pop. That looks really nice. Okay, one more example of aspen trees. We're going to come in here, and instead of using the create color range mask here, I'm just going to use my editing companion over here where it does it for me. I'm going to select specific color adjust. That's going to create my mask. And then I'm going to come in here and select the aspen tree. I'm going to do the exact same thing where I refine the selection, and let's bring it down. The other thing you can do is when you have the dropper out, you can actually hold shift and you can add another color. So that might add another color range. It might add a darker version of the color, a lighter version of the color. In this case, we don't really need it. We really only need it for this aspen trees. Now, you might be wondering, why wouldn't you just use the HSL sliders for this? So let's delete that mask. Let's go into our HSL and let's go to luminance. Let's say we wanted to brighten this aspen trees. And we select our selector here, and we select an aspen tree, and I start brightening it. And you're going to notice it's going to get brighter, but the saturation is not changing. It's just adding more luminance, and it's not looking as natural. So let's undo that. Let's go back, add our specific color adjust back in, go back to our mask, reselect the color, reselect our refinement here, and then if I increase my whites or I increase my exposure, it's going to have a far more natural look. And you get way more control over the actual color you're selecting. So maybe we don't want that grass there. And maybe we want to bring up the shadows in that area. Or maybe we want to add more contrast to those aspen trees. If I added dehaze, for example, or maybe we wanted to create a more ethereal look on those aspen trees by decreasing the clarity. I think that you get the point though. You just get more control using the color range mask for a specific color than the HSL. You can also mix this with other masks, which is what we're about to do. So that's the obvious use case with color range masks. Let me show you a few that are not as obvious. So here's an image of a little black bear that I took, and I've already gone through and edited this image, and I've created this nice large radial mask on the black bear to brighten it up so that he's the most, or she is the most obvious thing in the photo. The problem is it's brightening up all those trees around the bear, and it's kind of distracting because those are much brighter than the black fur of the bear. So what I did is I actually created a color range mask as a subtract to that mask. So what I mean by that is let's delete this color range. So I've created this linear gradient. All it's doing is it's bringing up the exposure. You can tell what it's doing. But if I go to subtract in this mask and go to color range and select the color of these leaves, and then again, refine by holding Option or Alt. And we can refine quite a bit. Now, if I turn this on and off, that means that that radial filter is now not being affected in that color range for this mask. And you can tell that when I hover over the mask or I hit my overlay, and you can see what's going on. Actually, let's change it. Let's make it a little more obvious. So this is what my mask is affecting. And if I turn off color range, you could see it's completely removing those leaves from being affected. Let's go back to color. It was just a little confusing considering my color overlay is green. And that's that image. Let me show you one more example with some other bears. Here's some 2 brown bears from Alaska. And I had the same issue in this image where the areas around them were too bright because of all of this green foliage that just reflects a lot of light. So I created a color range mask. All I did was come in, select that green foliage, and I just decreased the exposure of that green foliage. Super simple, but it adds just a little bit of control to your image. Okay, let me show you another example. So in this example, I created a giant radial filter in the middle to brighten up the middle part of my image and that waterfall. The problem is, if you notice, the leaves are getting hit by too much of that exposure brightness. So what I did is I created a color range mask, a subtract again, just like the black bear, and I just subtracted those leaves from this mask. And now it's creating that nice bright waterfall, but it's not affecting the leaves nearly as much. And you can always refine this with a little bit more or a little bit less to give you a little bit more control over what you're subtracting or adding to your mask. Okay, I'll show you one more example. This is a really cool use case that I use in my Lightroom editing companion. If you come over here to the haze removal mask, that's going to create a mask in here called extra haze removal. All this is a color range mask you would just create. You come in here, select the haziest area of your image. So I'm going to select somewhere down here, and then it should remove a little bit of haze from the image. You can tell what it's doing right there. And this gives you more selection over that particular part. Instead of just using the dehaze slider, which can have a huge effect on your image, this is giving you a more selective role in your image. Now you can tell the only thing it's really doing, a little bit of dehaze, removing a tiny bit of saturation, warming up that part by a little bit, and then decreasing the shadows by just ever so slightly. It's creating a nice effect on the haze that's happening in this image. And that's by using a color range mask. I use this all the time. I think it's a really cool tool. Okay, last but not least, the most important image and probably the best version or best use case that I've ever used for the color range mask is to brighten up this tree. So I've already created that mask. I actually used this in my video from a couple years ago. It's one of my favorite images I've ever taken. I call this Dance in the Desert. And this particular color range mask is what really brought this image together. So I'm going to turn it on. So all this is, if I turn off the color range, is a radial gradient created around the tree, but I didn't want it to affect, as you can tell, all of the areas around it. So I just did a color range intersection, meaning I did the radial gradient, came up here to create an intersect, and then did a color range, meaning that the mask now only affects the color plus the radial gradient. And that is the effect of the entire image. And it really makes that tree pop, and it's really natural as well. It's as if this thing is glowing in moonlight almost, and I just really love the way that it looks and worked in this particular image. And while this image is using the color range mask to only affect the greens of the trees, we were intersecting it with the radial mask so that the brightest part of the tree is in the middle and that it kind of fades off at the outer parts of the tree. So if you actually zoom in here, you'll notice back here that a lot of these parts of the tree are not getting as bright. And it creates a much natural effect on the entire tree that I really love. And it's something that, you know, this particular image, it works really well on, even though it's only using the color range mask in the most obvious way. Anyways, that's pretty much all I have for you today. Like I said, check out that editing Lightroom companion down below. I'm super proud of it. You can even check out my full video on it where I edit some of your images using it and talking about it. Anyways, that's it. Hope you enjoyed. If you liked it, give it a like. Consider subscribing if you loved it. And I'll see you again on the next one. Later.